As some of you may know, I have a strong belief that the Bible is as relevant today as it was when it was written. And I think we have some intriguing set of readings in the second Sunday of Advent that I think supports this belief. But I also have questions that I can only partially answer at best. And one of the questions I have is, how is it that John the Baptist got the people to follow him when what he was offering was hard and it was painful? In reading the first reading from the prophet Isaiah, it helps to remember that these words were originally aimed at the Jewish people who had been taken out of their own land. They were living in a foreign land without the ability and the opportunity to celebrate their own faith, and they longed to return to their land and to rebuild the temple. This has some parallels to our lives today. To be certain, we are in exile from God because of our sin and the sin of the world. And two of those sins, which don't get much attention, are the sins of complacency and apathy. I believe that we are in exile because our world has been hijacked, and we have sat back and we've let it happen. So shame on us. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the increasing possibility of war with North Korea, about the continued rise in terrorism and the misguided use of weapons. I'm talking about the scandals that have recently been uncovered, that have been going on, some for a long time, even decades. I'm talking about politicians, movie producers, actors, athletes, and people in positions of authority who have recently been exposed for the overt sexual harassment of men, of women, and of children. Time magazine made headlines last week when it chose for its Person of the Year several persons. The women who came forward to break their silence about powerful men who had sexually harassed and abused them. Time called these women the silence breakers, women who had had enough. Finally, enough has transpired, and people have had enough of these crimes against humanity that they are now speaking up. This is a case where bad behavior has been allowed to flourish because good people chose to do nothing. So the analogy to the first reading is that the valleys need to be filled in and the mountains need to be made low. The valleys and the mountains of Isaiah are not physical. They are the ups and the downs that we ourselves have created. Mountains of pride, greed, of superiority, or whatever makes us think that we are better than others and have no need for accountability or reconciliation. Ravines of jealousy, of self-pity, of whatever drags us down and stifles hope. We are all subject to them at times in a multitude of different forms. And if we have tried to be faithful and find ourselves failing over and over again, then the words of Isaiah speak to us. Comfort. Give comfort to my people. Every valley shall be filled up, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. Then the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. The second reading from St. Peter repeats the message of God's love for us. The Lord is not slow about his promise, as some think of slowness, but is patient with you, not wanting any to perish, but at all to come to repentance. End of quote. It is God himself who wants to give us comfort, but God can only do that when our hearts are open to him. It is God who invites us to be patient and who reminds us, Beloved, while you are waiting for these things, strive to be found by him at peace. John the Baptist is the voice calling for that straight path, a direct route for God to come to his people. He appears in the wilderness proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. a spiritual preparation for a physical coming of Jesus. John the Baptist was a silence breaker. He talked of repentance, of patience that leads to sacrifice. He also talked about one of the most difficult areas in our lives to master, and that is change. Yet the people listened and they followed him. And as we all know, change is never easy. It is just so much easier to sit back, expect the government to change, the world to change, our spouse, our children, our parents, and other people to change. But if we really want change that we can believe in, we need to change. John the Baptist's message to us is to look in the mirror. If we really want to help reform the world and return the human race to God's original plan, then that person looking back at us in that mirror needs to change. Our challenge is to change our own attitudes and then trust that God will use this change to play a part in the transformation of the world. So why did they follow John the Baptist into the desert? Well, my conclusion to all of this, flawed as it may be, is in two parts. First, in part because he practiced what he preached. He walked the talk. And secondly, the people had had enough. John the silence breaker had made his point. I wonder how long before our current society reaches that tipping point. In Luke chapter 8, verse 17, Jesus says, "For there is nothing hidden that will not become visible, and nothing secret that will not be known and come to light." I wonder how long it's going to take until good people wake up and realize that the same thing is happening to our world in the areas of abortion, euthanasia, and physician-assisted suicide. How long before we become the silence breakers that God calls us to be?